The New Orleans axe murders, which managed to create a nightmare for the entire city of New Orleans in 1919, have continued to be a mystery for exactly 100 years. No one has yet figured out who the murderer was who tried to cut off the necks of 12 different people with an axe, or why he introduced himself as the devil.
Hello my friends, I am Meraz. Do not forget to like the video and subscribe for more of our videos. Thank you in advance.
This week, in our Mysterious Events series, we are featuring the New Orleans Axeman, who calls himself an invisible demon and who has caused bloodshed in New Orleans, famous for its entertainment, bars and jazz music. Let's take a look at the killer who managed to create a fearful jazz feast in all of New Orleans by threatening to kill you all if I don't hear jazz music in every house tonight. His victims whom he hunted while they were sleeping and attacked with an axe, and the usual suspects. Killer committed murders with his victims' axes. USA, where jazz music was at its peak, turning everyone's life into a nightmare, this man, called the Axeman of New Orleans, whose identity was never determined, brutally attacked 12 people in a period of 9 months and managed to kill 6 of them. The killer had only one method of killing. He would enter people's bedrooms when it was dark, and kill some while they were sleeping and others when they were about to fall asleep.
One of the worst parts of the whole thing was that the killer never used his own axe or knife to kill. He would use whatever he found in the victim's room or kitchen after he entered their house.
The first victims are Catherine and Joseph Maggio. Now we go back to May 23, 1918. Catherine Maggio and her husband Joseph Maggio were attacked while sleeping in their bedroom, unaware that they would be the first victims of the New Orleans Axeman. Catherine's head was completely severed from her body, and Joseph had deep cuts all over, especially his throat. The first person to find the brutally murdered couple was Joseph's brother. Of course, the first thing to do was call the police. The police who arrived at the house first wanted to determine the weapon used by the killer. There was a huge hole at the bottom of the front door, and it was very obvious that the killer had used an axe at first. However, some cuts on Catherine and Joseph's bodies showed that a much smaller weapon was used than an axe.
As a result of the investigation, a horrific detail emerged. The New Orleans Axeman first cut Catherine and Joseph's necks with a razor blade, then used an axe to cut off their heads. The most tragicomic part of the whole thing was that the murderer left the axe he used to kill the couple at the scene, and despite this, the police were unable to collect any evidence because fingerprint records were not that advanced at the time. A month had passed since the Maggio's murder, and on June 28th, the killer turned his attention to Louis Bissouma and Anna Lowe. The New Orleans Axeman chose an axe that belonged to the house as the murder weapon and struck the couple once on the head.
Found by a baker in the morning, Lowe and Bissouma were miraculously still alive. Anna's left ear was completely cut off by the blow of the axe, and the couple waited to be rescued in a bed that had turned into a lake with blood flowing from their heads. When the couple was taken to the hospital, everyone thought they were married, but it was later revealed that Anna was Louis' mistress. The couple, who came to after a long time in the hospital, had nothing remarkable in their statements. The killer had caught his victims asleep, and the blows they had given to their heads with an axe had been enough to blur every detail. The police first thought of robbery, but all the belongings and money in the house were still there. Police detained the 41-year-old man Bissouma had hired weeks earlier to appear to be doing his job, but they had no evidence to keep him in prison. They headed to Bissouma's home and found letters in Bissouma's trash in German, Yiddish, a Jewish language, and Russian. The letters, police said, indicated that Bissouma was a German spy, and the man, who had just been released from the hospital, was immediately taken to the police station. Of course, none of the evidence the police had was enough to charge Bissouma, but the statements made by Anna Lowe were also confusing. The press had now learned that Bissouma had a mistress, and Lowe kept making accusations against her lover. No one believed Lowe, who told the police that Bissouma was a spy and the New Orleans Axeman, and the woman did not survive the surgery she had to have to treat her left face, which was Lowe was attacked by the New Orleans Axeman. 2 months later, the New Orleans Axeman attacked a woman named Anna Schneider, who was 8 months pregnant, while she was sleeping despite suffering severe injuries to her skull. Anna survived and gave birth to her child 2 days later. For the police who investigated the scene, this crime scene was no different from the previous ones. Nothing had been stolen from the house, and the murder weapon had been chosen from the victim's house.
Only 5 days after the horrific murder attempt, the killer attacked Joseph Romano, 60, although Romano's blood-soaked body was found by his nieces Pauline and Mary. The old man was not as lucky as Anna Schneider.
A photo believed to belong to an ex-murderer. Pauline and Mary may have been the first witnesses to see the Axeman of New Orleans as they entered the room where they found their uncle's body. The killer quickly fled. The 2 young girls described the Axeman of New Orleans as a tall, dark-skinned man wearing a suit. He appeared to be in his 45s or 52nd, wearing a large coat and a fedora. After Romano's death, chaos engulfed New Orleans. People became paranoid, fearing that the axe murderer would enter their homes, and many people claimed to have seen the axe murderer in the back streets of New Orleans. Newspapers began to report on the murderer, and authorities began to warn New Orleans residents about the axe murderer who was hunting people in their sleep at night.
Series of measures were taken to prevent another murder, and a police officer was posted on almost every street corner.
The measures worked, but only for a while, and the New Orleans Axeman was not heard from again until March. When the killer returned in the cold of March, he first tried to kill a family with children. On March 10, 1919, Rose Cortamilia woke up to the sounds of her husband Charles struggling and saw him struggling against a man wielding an axe. Charles lost the fight, and the axe killer first attacked Charles, then Rose, and finally the couple's baby with an axe. Charles and Rose survived the incident, but unfortunately their baby was brutally murdered.
As fear and panic once again took over New Orleans, a letter from an axe murderer arrived at the police station, as you can see from the letter below. The axe murderer seemed to have vowed to terrorize New Orleans. Dear mortals, you never could catch me, and you never will. Even the oxygen surrounding the earth can't see me, so you never will. I'm not human like you, but the spirit of a demon from a fiery hell. I'm the murderer New Orleans residents and stupid cops called the Axeman of New Orleans.
The police are so stupid that it amuses not only me, but also our satanic overlord. But tell them to be on their guard, and not to dig any further into who I am. If they continue to investigate me, they will face the wrath of the Axeman of New Orleans and wish they had never been born. Citizens of New Orleans, you may think I'm a ruthless killer. I am. But you have no idea how far I'll go if you push me. I must say I am pretty close to the angel of death. I'll never hesitate to cut down your best people with a single command. Now let's get to the point. I will be passing through New Orleans next Tuesday at 12:15 World Time with my last drop of compassion. I have a proposition for you. I'm a huge jazz fan, and I swear to God that I will forgive everyone who hears jazz music in their homes that night. People who don't hear jazz music in their homes on Tuesday night will taste my axe. Just as the New Orleans Axeman said, jazz music was heard from homes and bars on Tuesday night, and no one was killed in New Orleans that night. On August 10th, the killer returned to kill people. Steve Boker was attacked by the New Orleans Axeman while sleeping in his own bed on the night of August 10th, and after the killer escaped, Boker dragged himself to his neighbor's house. Boker lost his memory completely after that night and was never the same again because of his amnesia. He could not remember the time of the attack or how the axe mark on his head came to be. The New Orleans Axeman then attacked Sarah Lauman and then Mike Pepitone on October 27, 1919. This was the extent of the terror inflicted on his victims by the axe murderer who introduced himself as the devil. The vicious murderer brutally attacked a total of 12 people in less than a year. Some survived the attack, while others lost their lives due to their injuries. Theories have begun to emerge for the murderer, whose identity has never been determined. If you wish, let's take a look at what these theories are. The first theory put forward was that the 12 attacks were not carried out by the same person. Many of the 12 victims had personal reasons for being attacked, and some murderous individuals might have taken advantage of the New Orleans Axeman panic to attempt murder. Police believe Mike Pepitone was killed by a mobster and Anna Lowe was killed by a German spy named Louis Bassoon. Bissouma was later imprisoned for the murder of Anna Lowe, but was never identified as the New Orleans Axeman. Another claim that was made was that the axe murderer was a supernatural being who infiltrated houses in the form of smoke and transformed into a large man. The fact that the murderer introduced himself as the incarnation of the devil on earth strengthened these claims, and the man became an urban legend. Let me not forget that this theory is extremely funny. First of all, the man has a deadly weapon like an axe, but most of his victims managed to live after the attack. If we were talking about a non-human being, I think the killer's attack and death rate would be much higher. The photo is believed to be of Joseph. Before we move on to the third and final theory, let's take a look at the New Orleans Axeman's latest victims. The killer attacks Mike and Esther Pepitone while they are sleeping again, and while Mike dies 2 hours after the attack, Esther somehow manages to survive. Esther, who testified after the attack, states that there was not one but 3 killers in the house. Esther moves to Los Angeles a year later and marries Angela Albano. Albano disappears strangely in the first year of their marriage. Shortly afterwards, Joseph Mumphrey enters Esther's house and demands $500 and the woman's jewelry, saying that if you do not give him, he will kill you like your ex-husband. Esther coldly approaches her drawer and reaches for her gun, shooting Joseph 3 times. Taken to the police station, Esther says that Joseph is the New Orleans Axeman, the man who killed her husband with an axe. The police investigate Joseph and learn that he runs a blackmail ring in New Orleans and has a racist attitude towards Italians. It turns out that almost all of the axe murderer's victims are either Italian or have some connection to Italy. Joseph Murphy has been in and out of prison many times over the last 10 years, and coincidentally, the time he was not in prison matches the time the murder occurred. The police never directly connect Joseph to the New Orleans Axeman, but there have been no more axe murders since his death. The identity of the axe murderer who terrorized the city of New Orleans, once known only for entertainment, and who made people afraid to sleep, and whether Joseph had any connection to the murders, have remained a mystery for 105 years.